The most important meal of the day, second breakfast.
Hi, everybody. Welcome back to another Second Breakfast podcast. I'm Andy Roth alongside Phil Duvall. Say hi, Phil.
Well, hello, everybody, and welcome to what Andy just called Second Breakfast Podcast, because that's what it is. And also, it's Friday.
It's Friday, and at the end of another long week, and Friday means one thing.
Actually,
here at
Andy,
Second Breakfast.
we had Memorial Day. It was Memorial Day this week. It was a short week for many of our people.
You know what? It was a short week for me too, but doesn't it seem like 5 days always get smushed into 4?
Such a long period of time.
Right?
5 days. What's
Right?
wrong with you people?
Ugh. Yeah.
The work week is way too long.
Right?
Should be 4 days of work and 3 days of rest. Just like in the Bible. Oh wait, no, the Bible was 6 days of work and 1 day of rest.
Well, apparently, on all the to be fair, fairly geeky websites, they're saying that this new 3D printing breakthrough is eventually going to invalidate the entire concept of economy. So, you know.
The whole 3D printing thing that they're like, and now people can make guns, and now people can do this. I'm like, just relax with the 3D printing. First of all, they cost like millions of dollars to own one. And secondly...
I mean, John Malkovich did it in The Line of Fire, you know? It wasn't 3D printing, but he made it.
Well, he did it with a wooden. He did it with a wooden gun.
Plastic.
And oh, that's right, it was plastic.
Yeah.
At any rate, the point is, don't make guns with 3D printers, people. Okay. In fact, don't get a 3D printer. Just live your life. Just go out and have a good time, and don't buy a 3D printer. That's not correct. Like, don't. Oh, and don't clone anybody. That's also weird.
You know what? I'm gonna try and live by those rules.
I mean, it's the 2 commandments of Phil. The rest. By the way, these do not supersede the other commandments. They're just They're just additions.
Sure.
They're supplemental commandments. Don't get a 3D printer and don't clone anybody. That's 11 and 12, and you'll be fine.
Sure.
Okay.
Sure.
Okay. I'm glad we.
I mean, part of the reason that I'm going to try and live by them is that I don't really think it's going to be very hard to live by them. Like, I'm not going to trip and accidentally clone someone.
I don't like to place heavy burdens on my people.
I appreciate that.
I like to try to make things nice and easy.
I appreciate that.
Nice and easy.
Right?
All right. Hey, you know what we're doing?
What are we doing?
We're stalling for no reason because today is a glorious day.
It's true. I love Fridays.
It's Mailbag Day.
Mailbag Day.
And guess what, Andy?
What's that?
These aren't actually the questions. The questions are online, but I'm doing this with a piece of paper anyway, and I'm going to hold it up like I'm reading it when I'm really just looking at my computer screen.
Guys, that's the sound of Phil reading the questions.
I'm really excited, partially because we have a question from my brother today, and
Your seatbelts, it's going to be a bumpy ride. Go ahead.
Yeah, and he is angry.
I can't wait. I love your brother, and I love him especially when he's angry. Go for it.
Well, then you love him much of the time. He's filled with urine and vinegar. All right, here we go.
I see what you did there.
I didn't think. Well, it's a family podcast. All right. So this question comes from my brother Grant, and it's pointed directly at us in a very clear way.
Can't wait.
It says, "At what point in life do you stop giving away your hard-earned monies to these studios who are using foreign investment capital to produce formulaic blockbusters in favor of smaller budget stories? How many dollars will you spend on Hangovers and Iron Mans before you realize that you are just funding the global conspiracy to distract billions of people from actually thinking and just staring brainlessly at explosions on a big screen while shoving empty calories into their pie holes? Is that too French of me? Maybe. But my people came from France, and I love 3-day weekends."
We got this question a few days ago. It's a wonderful question. I'm going to need you, folks, when we got this question, I, as has apparently become my want, I misinterpret 50% of the questions that come in.
No, it's not that high. Only 45 tops.
46 tops. So I'm going to need you to decipher what he's actually asking here. What is he actually asking us?
Why do we keep spending money on the same old crap, as in, i.e., Iron Man 3, when there was already an Iron Man 1 and 2?
Sure.
And the Avengers and all the stuff. Mm-hmm. Why do we keep spending money on basically seeing the same things over and over again? Mm-hmm. When we could be spending, which is when our time and our money is finite. Right. And we could be spending time and money on seeing things like Mud the movie, which was a tiny little movie that blew our minds.
Yes.
Or Pulp Fiction when it came out, which we remember was an independent film, or whatever. I mean, the movies that you've loved this year, you and I've talked, and the movies that you've loved have all been. I mean, you've loved some action movies and stuff, and you've liked them, but the movies that you've absolutely loved have all been smaller indie flicks.
Yes, yes.
And yet, today you saw After Earth, which rhymes with something awful for a reason.
And
for a reason.
I honestly, I couldn't get it out of my head.
And when I saw the previews, and this is the beginning of my answer, but it's just it's sort of, I'm channeling my brother here because I've seen Iron Man 3 not once, nay, but twice.
Sure.
And I haven't seen Star Trek Into Darkness yet, but that's just a matter of time. I'm not going to see Hangover 3, but only because it has just been so unanimously banned.
It really has been.
And I loved the first one so much and did not care for the second one. I was hoping the third one would kind of give it a turnaround. It clearly is not doing that. So, right. But to be completely honest, time is finite. We all die, and if it's on cable someday, I'll probably watch it. So I'm still part of the problem.
Sure.
And his point is, why are we doing that when it doesn't actually, like, what are we doing to ourselves? Why are we spending time and money on empty things and contributing to the ruination of America, apparently, according to him?
Sure.
When we could be giving our time and money, which is finite, to better things. If we're going to watch movies or television, to only the best, and then go outside and take a breath of fresh air.
Okay.
Something like that. That's the gist of his question.
Sure. Well, I mean, my first blanket answer is because by and large we like things that are safe. We don't at the end of the day like to be surprised. Really.
Right.
Because we don't want to, and this is not getting better as movies get more and more expensive, we don't want to feel like we've wasted our time, we don't want to feel like we've wasted our money. So it's the McDonald's principle, right? Like, it's not going to be a good hamburger, but you know exactly what you're getting.
Yeah.
So, but there are more things I want to say about this, shockingly. This has always happened. Everything he says this is not a new phenomenon. The reason that studios haven't always used foreign investment capital is because other countries didn't have money they wanted to give to Hollywood before now. Like,
right.
Formulaic blockbusters in a generation gone by, the Busby Berkeley musical with like the thousands of women in bathing suits diving into it, that was their version of the blockbuster. The Ziegfeld Follies put up on the screen. It was
right.
It's not an accident that movies like The Dirty Dozen and The Great Escape and The Guns of Navarone have all-star casts. They had all-star casts then for the same reason there are all-star casts now.
Sure.
And my last point, which is my weakest point, so I'm going to say it and move right on, is at the end of the day, there just aren't that many stories.
I actually think that, to be honest with you, the funny thing is I think that's your strongest point, so I'll jump in here.
Thank you.
No, I really do, because I think everything else is just making excuses, because the reality is if you're either watching empty crap or you're not. And the reality, as much as I loved Iron Man 3, I can't actually say that it's significantly different from Iron Man 2 or Iron Man 1. And I'm not even saying I want it to be different. In fact, when you watch a movie, you go, especially sequels and chains, you go, what am I getting here? Like I remember I saw Skyfall and I was like, it was really good. And he was like, yeah, I don't care. I'm not going to see it because I've seen James Bond and they're all the same movie. I was like, yeah, but it's a good one. And he's like, yeah, but it's all the same. But now I'm going to let you in on a little bit of how much of a fanatic my brother is about this. And I find this really fascinating. I disagree with him fundamentally about this, but I find it fascinating.
Okay.
He refused to see Lincoln.
Okay.
Because he said, I've seen My Left Foot. I get it. Daniel Day-Lewis is amazing. What do you want?
Right.
Like, I've seen There Will Be Blood. I get that Daniel Day-Lewis, and I've seen Gangs of New York. At this point, I get that Daniel Day-Lewis can play anybody.
Yeah. And
I'm sure he plays Lincoln. So what?
Sure.
Big deal. Yeah. I've spent the money on seeing Daniel Day-Lewis be good. But and there's nothing I can say to get him to. That's that. But
Right.
my argument actually, I have a twofold argument. The first part is very simply, there really are only enough so many stories, and our reality is that we tell these stories over and over again as cultures, and the more we tell them and the ways we tell them define how our culture is made, define what is important about our culture.
Well said.
So, for instance, well, I mean, go all the way back to the Old Testament. It's not even a story. It's the book of Ecclesiastes, where the writer of Ecclesiastes says, there is nothing new under the sun. That was thousands of years ago that he said that. Actually, Grant, you should read Ecclesiastes because it's really cynical. And the whole point is, Paul didn't make it into the Bible. The Jewish scholars were like, we're not so sure about this one, because he basically, the guy goes, in the end, you live and you die, and good people and bad people get bad things happen to them, bad people have good things happen to them, and then everybody dies. So have fun with that.
I heard.
So work really hard, do your best, and enjoy food and drink, because you're all going to die.
I heard that they weren't going to include it in the Bible, but then it got optioned by Hollywood, so they decided.
So they had to. Well,
right.
there's the French. There's a foreign investors from China actually, so they had to go on. No, but the point is that from the the stories we love, and if you look at the story, I mean, you and I did a whole thing on Wreck-It Ralph and how it was Jacob and Esau, or you watch East of Eden, or you read East of Eden. Great piece of art, literature, and clearly taken from Cain and Abel, Genesis 4. And frankly, my job is to tell people the same stories over and over and over.
Sure.
I'm telling the story. I tell the stories that have been told for years, centuries, millennia. I tell them over and over again. And so the reality is, so obviously I have some invested interest in this being true.
Indeed.
But I think the reality is there really are so many stories, and I want to do honor to the fact that look, I agree with my brother about this fact. There really is only so much time, and there really is only so much money that I have.
Sure.
And it is why. So that is, for instance, why we don't see movies that we know we're not going to like. Well, right. I try not to. You are about to see World War Z on principle, but I try not to see things that I'm not going to like.
Sure.
And really, like stuff like Project Melway, where we knew there was going to be stuff we liked and stuff we didn't like. I went into it mostly for the idea of the adventure with you.
Yeah, you're serving a larger purpose. Yeah,
it's a Crucible,
Indeed.
Which also was a movie starring Daniel Day-Lewis, which you should see, because I think you should see everything Daniel Day-Lewis is in.
Indeed.
Because the reality is, it's like the same reason why you want to buy every album from somebody that's good if you like their music.
Right.
Because I want to see what he does this time. I'm interested in the actor and what he does this time. For instance,
go ahead, please.
Well, just to Iron Man 3, I care about the character, and I want to see what he does this time.
Can I pivot?
Please.
Can I pivot your analogy a bit? Because I don't disagree with anything you've said, but more than like buying another album, it's like, do you ever see a musician live more than once? Right? Right. And well, he might say no. Well, right,
he might say no. I've seen Bob Dylan 35 times.
Sure, and let me ask you this, and not necessarily you, but in general, folks out there in Second Breakfast Nation, I'm talking directly to you, as well as to Phil. When you see a musician live, do you want them to do it exactly the same way as they have it on the album, on the CD? And maybe you do. I'm not saying one is better than the other, but but look, I knew what I was getting when I saw Iron Man 3, or I knew what I was hoping to get. And it wasn't reinventing the wheel, but like our friend Chris Robinson said when we had him on, Iron Man 2, he could have watched a 2-hour movie of just that Senate hearing at the beginning of Iron Man 2 and he would have been totally satisfied. That wouldn't have satisfied me, but it satisfied him, right?
Right.
And that's, I mean, there's literally no action in that, right? So it's about the character. It's about the actor. It's with Iron Man 3, I'm not going to lie. I was interested to see Shane Black's direction. I was interested to see Shane Black's, to hear Shane Black's dialogue.
So I'm with you, and I want to say two things about that.
Yeah.
I want to respond to your first part. Do I want to see them do the same thing over and over again? Specifically, so Bob Dylan and Paul Simon toured together. Bob Dylan specifically, I see him over and over again because he doesn't do any of his songs the same way, ever.
Awesome.
In fact, one time in college, I saw him 5 nights in a row, and he did a different set list every night, and he did a couple songs the same, and they sounded different. I mean, it was like, what is going on? How do you do this? Now, I saw him 4 times with Paul Simon. He toured with Paul Simon back in '99, and I was like, "You have got to be kidding me," because I grew up on Simon and Garfunkel, and I like Paul Simon's solo stuff, and Bob Dylan is my hero. So okay, I'm going to that. So I went to 2 in Massachusetts and 2 nights in a row, and then a week later I went to 2 in Long Island with my girlfriend at the time in New York. We drove to Jones Beach and saw him twice there in a row.
They just named the tour Phil.
It was like Phil's tour. And no, because here's what happened. Oh, and in the middle, like they did each one, they switched off who would open and who would close. And then in the middle, they would do a couple songs together and do a couple of each other's songs. Bob Dylan and Paul Simon duetting on Knocking on Heaven's Door and Sound of Silence. It was special for me.
That's amazing.
But Paul Simon's show, all 4 nights, was exactly the same. Sure. Including the spontaneous stuff.
Right.
Like the little things he would say and the little accents he would do between things. It was choreographed to a T, which I shouldn't be surprised about if I know the way he does his music.
Sure.
And by the end, I was so disenchanted. I stopped listening to Paul Simon for like 5 or 6 years.
Fascinating.
I'm totally back onto Paul Simon now. But
I'm not taking you either way, but
it took me. No, I bring that up because we do, but when I see Bob Dylan, as many times as I've seen him, I want difference, but I'm seeing the same guy who wrote the same music.
Right.
And even the fact that it's going to be different is a consistency. So there is some consistency even within that.
There's nothing constant but change. Sure.
But yeah, but except there's nothing constant but change, and that old guy with the gravelly, croaky voice up there that I'm in love with, singing another song differently again. Right. I know what I'm getting to some degree. Right. So there's that. The other thing I want to say is that you brought up like what you're gonna the development of these things with Iron Man 3 and all this stuff. I think to some degree there is some prejudice in what Grant's saying. There are movies that he's describing that he is absolutely right about, and if his critique is not about us but about America, or us too, but I mean like Transformers, they're about to make a 4th one. Mm-hmm. I mean that stuff's empty. Let's not kid ourselves. It's empty. Sure. It's not. It's devoid of anything. And there are action movies, plenty of action movies out there that are just devoid of anything.
Agreed.
And I think he's moving in that direction, he's like, well, I've seen it all before. And I'm kind of like, well, no, you haven't. Like, not to the sense that, not just for the eye that there are things you've never seen before, but also to the degree that, like, if you like action movies at all, if an action movie that is good to you, like Terminator 2, let's go back to the classics, Terminator 2, Die Hard. Yeah. Then you recognize that those things are doing something new with something old, and that there is goodness to be had in the genre of action. Yes. Then it stands to reason that there could be movies made today that follow the tropes, that follow the rules of a genre, but somehow bring something new and exciting or make you think about it. Mm-hmm. In the end, right? In the end, we want to see movies, people like you and I want to see movies not just to be entertained, but to make us think or feel something either that we felt before and want to remember it, which is an important part of life, in my opinion.
I agree with you.
Or to feel something new and to think something differently.
Yes.
And I think action movies that are great are capable of that. And I will grant you that just like horror movies or zombie movies have a propensity to go into cheesy, schlocky, terrible directions, even if there's – and so the great ones sort of stand out. Mm-hmm. I could say that about action movies as well.
Oh, absolutely.
But that being said, a good action movie is just as good as a good comedy, which is just as good as a good drama. And yes. So I don't know. So I mean, in the end, also you and I just may love movies more than him.
Well, sure.
And so listen. So when you you don't love music the way I love music,
right?
So you're not going to spend nearly the amount of time buying all sorts of crazy stuff and trying out music that I do.
True.
Like you will buy certain things you like and listen to certain radio stations. Yes. Whereas I'm buying stuff that turns out I didn't like it. I mean, I'm going to try this out, but it's because I'm like, I love it. And so that's how I'm obsessed about it.
Sure.
So he's not obsessed about that stuff, So I think that's part of it. That is part of it.
And that's totally fair. That's totally fair.
Does that make sense? Does that make sense?
It absolutely makes sense. It absolutely makes sense. I mean, I don't know that I can say this in a way that comes off as anything other than I have really low standards, but
After Earth.
But After Earth. Woof. Here's the poster tagline,
What's
everybody.
the one you saw? Say it. I love it.
Not nearly as bad as The Village. Yes.
It's good. No, you know what I'm curious about is I remember you saw a movie earlier this year, a couple months ago, where you were like, I'm about to go see this movie. What am I doing? And I was like, no, really.
Good Day to Die Hard.
A Good Day to Die Hard.
Yes.
Again, a movie you saw on principle.
Yes. So here's the deal. I find it hard to say this without it coming off as I have lower standards, but I don't really, and maybe that's what it is. I'm big enough to admit that, but it doesn't feel that way. And what I have to say is this: because of this obsession that you and I and people like us have, and Grant clearly doesn't, and that's fine. Because of that, there are more things in a movie that are likely to entertain me.
Yeah.
You know, like I can walk out of a movie that wasn't great, for example, After Earth, and I can say to you, you know what? It was a really beautiful movie. It was gorgeous. Yeah. It didn't make it a great movie. It didn't make it a good movie, but it made it so that I wasn't sorry I saw it.
I knew a guy once who, even if a girl, you remember when you're like a teenager and you're just as picky as possibly imaginable, like just completely like the pickiest person who ever lived.
Sure.
And I was talking to someone recently who was pointing out, I thought this was great. He was pointing out that he was with a bunch of, he's 35 and he was with a bunch of 20-something guys. And then somebody mentioned Jennifer Lawrence and he was just like, she's gorgeous. And they were like, nah, her face is a little this or that. And he was just like, at first he just shook his head like you just did. And then he said to himself, I remember being that age and just being hyper, like critical and being like, she has to look exactly like my ideal in my head or else she's a dog.
Right.
But I knew a guy once who, no matter what, even at that age, was able to find something about a woman that he found attractive. Like she could have just been not attractive by anybody's standards. And he could have been like, yeah, but she has pretty nice hair.
Sure.
Like he was just good at that. Like he's just good at being like, no, but look at her eyes. They're beautiful. I'm not saying he was a good person. He just was able to find something good about everything. Like I'm not going to say the guy was a nice person, but maybe he was just girl crazy. But he was able to do that.
He got this power by clubbing baby seals.
Nah, it's not a power. It's just like he loved girls enough that he was always able to find.
I'm with you.
And I think that's the way you are with movies. I really
think that's
do.
True. I think that's true.
I think, and I'm not going to be too pointed about the question asker here, but he may be harder to please than you are.
I see no way that's true.
So, I want to, by the way, guys, to end this question, one of the things that brought it, I know, because it's my brother, and I've talked to him about it since he wrote the question of the week, although I haven't answered it. I didn't answer it. I just talked to him about the question and around the question.
Indeed.
One of the things that brought this up for him is an article that I sent him, written by a reviewer. I think we might have talked about it before. His name is Alan Sepinwall, and he's on a website called HitFix. Mm-hmm. And he wrote an article. He's a TV reviewer who wrote an article that said, basically, I'm a TV reviewer. I watch TV for a living, and there's not enough time for me to watch all the good shows that are on TV right now because of the renaissance that TV is having. Mm-hmm. So I am literally watching. There's literally not enough hours in the day to watch good television, and it's my job. and Grant's point was, well, if the guy whose job it is to watch TV is saying that, what chance do we have at watching all the good television and movies that are out there, all the while trying to actually live our lives?
Right.
And that being the case, I wouldn't actually disagree with his point in the first place. Say, shut up and see everything Daniel Day-Lewis does. Just shut up. Just stop. He is an artist. Like that's like saying, I've seen Picasso.
Right.
I don't need to see other. I've seen him. I've seen what he does. I saw that one with the boob over on the side. I get it. No. Fine. If you don't want to see it, don't see it. But like, that's fine. But the man's an artist in his prime, and it's one of those moments that's rare in our time, I think, where someone is in their prime and the world is recognizing them in their prime.
Indeed. That's true. That is absolutely true.
You might say that for Meryl Streep as well, although she's been an institution for a really long time
Right.
and has that singularity of being one of the only women who's actually recognized for her craft
Agreed.
beyond just her looks.
Yeah.
Whereas Daniel Day-Lewis, although he's been around and been great for years, something is happening with him right now.
Yep.
Actually, something, you know what's happening with him right now is he's actually taking time off again because he's Daniel Day-Lewis and he does what he wants.
That's right.
But to me, as a film lover, I'm going to watch what Daniel Day-Lewis does and wait till he proves me wrong.
Absolutely.
Like, probably proves me wrong 3 or 4 times, actually, before.
Oh, yeah. He's built up a lot of goodwill.
Right.
A lot of
Right.
goodwill.
I think that's not an answer to the question. That's our response for now. This is one that could go on for a while.
Sure.
So, anyways. Our next question. Hold on. Now that I've ruffled the paper, let me go ahead and click over to look at it online where it really is.
You make me so tired. I'm just weary.
I think you're weary and projecting. So, this comes from...
I'm weary with love. I'm tired with love. Go ahead.
This comes from... never mind, forget it. This comes from... You know what? You're learning... You know what I'm teaching you by the way we hang out and the way we talk? You're learning about being married. Because you have to put up with me, and you do love me, but you're like, not tonight, honey. But Andy, let's just make a little bit of a joke. Let's just have this little joke. No, not that I have a headache. Please.
I gotta be honest. I'm not sure I can respond in any way that won't get both of us in trouble at some point, either immediately or down the road. So
just let's hold off.
Let's continue with our second question.
The second question comes from this second question for Second Breakfast comes from. Or by the way, I'm only doing 2 questions tonight, people.
Indeed.
This comes from a friend of the podcast named Josh.
Hello, Josh.
Hello, Josh. And I want to say that Josh. First of all, whereas Grant's question was just like grumble, 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 and he finished his question by saying, "Is that too French of me?" Yeah, a little bit, but that's okay. We are French. It is true. We are at least partially French.
Go watch. Hey, Grant. The last thing I'll say to you is go watch the 400 Blows and Jules and Jim, and then get back to me.
Oh my God, I would love for him to watch those movies. I'm going to make him watch those movies and see what he says. Mr. Frenchie independent movie.
I cannot wait.
All right, Josh. From Josh.
Yeah.
Dear Second Breakfast Podcast. First of all, everybody. Can you just notice how Josh starts a question?
Mm-hmm.
Dear Second Breakfast Podcast, in one of the most interesting episodes of the podcasts I've seen, wow, this guy is just...
I know.
I'm going to go friend him and then come back and we'll finish this podcast. In one of the most interesting episodes of the podcast I've seen, you recently talked about the role of race in casting. He's right, Andy. That was yesterday's podcast
It's
in which
true.
we discussed
It's true. Wait, when was that? When was it?
That was yesterday.
Was it? Right. Yes.
It was.
Yes. No, you're right. Wait.
So what he's saying is actually we're in our prime, and he's recognizing it.
We are nothing if not Daniel Day-Lewis.
I mean, I feel like the Daniel Day-Lewis of Day-Lewis's of podcasts, of movie podcasts that have small audiences in North America.
You know what? If you're waiting for me to disagree, settle in, my friend.
Have a Snickers. You're going to be here for a while. All right.
Not going anywhere for a while?
In one of the most interesting episodes of the podcast I've seen, you recently talked about the role of race in casting. Your opinions were trenchant, as always. I'm going to have to look that word up. It might be an insult. But
Josh, I love you. I'm recognizing the snark inherent in using the word trenchant. Continue.
Well, as always, trenchant, vigorous or incisive in expression or style. Vigorous or incisive in expression or style. Synonyms: sharp, keen, incisive, cutting, poignant, biting. That could mean so many things, Joshua. All right. Back to the question. But what about the role of gender in casting? Best regards, Josh. So again,
salutations.
Started beautifully, ended beautifully, had an actual question in there. What about the role of gender in casting?
I don't think I have a different answer than my answer for race, which is in a perfect world, it shouldn't matter at all, except for those things where race truly informs the character. Like you don't want Morgan Freeman to play Abraham Lincoln. You don't want a white guy to play Martin Luther King. And the argument can and has been made that race informs every person, and I get that, and that's fair. That's a fair statement. So the way I will modify it is to say this. as long as you can come up with a reason that it's not just a stunt, as long as you can justify it artistically, A, and as long as you are aware and sensitive to what you're doing when you change or make an unusual choice with the race or gender, I think those are the two things that are important to keep in mind when you're thinking about sort of cross-gender casting, as it were.
Yeah. I mean, gender. I think gender is more difficult than race because, for instance, James Bond being played by a black man could do all the same things, and it would have some implications, but only some.
Sure.
But James Bond being played by a woman and being called Jamie Bond,
indeed,
would create all sorts of questions and would in and of itself be a critique of the whole James Bond franchise.
That's true.
And it would just immediately be that.
Right.
So to some degree, yes, I agree with you. I guess I want to say I want to start off by what you said to some degree, and I think I didn't say this enough in yesterday's podcast, and in our friend a friend of mine, Quentin, commented on this, and I think it kind of made me think about it. I almost said it colored my thoughts on this, but I did kind of. It influences me it reminds me of the fact that what you said, race in our culture. We don't live in a perfect world. We live in a world where race does influence what people think about a character and not only because they're racist, but I mean, race influences my life. My race influences my life. Now, that being said, my gender influences my life.
Yeah.
And now, I think you can absolutely change a role from male to female.
Yep.
When you do that, you must recognize that you are changing the way people are going to think about the character.
Just be
sensitive. Doesn't mean you can't do it.
Yes.
Doesn't mean you can't do it.
Yes.
We watched Payback recently, a Mel Gibson film there's two different versions out there of. And unlike movies where it's like just slightly extended, the director's cut is radically different than the studio edition.
Extremely different. Completely different movie. Yeah.
In the studio edition, Chris Christopherson is the bad guy, and you see him.
Yep.
And in the director's cut, a woman played by Sally Kellerman is the bad guy, and you don't see her, you just hear her voice.
Yep.
And but the main bad guy, the main boss, is a guy instead of a girl, or a girl instead of a guy. It totally works.
Yeah.
But it does change it.
Agreed.
So the question really, the answer or the response, I guess, Josh, for me is when you decide to make a white character black, you are changing that character.
Mm-hmm.
When you decide to make a male character female, you are changing that character. And I would say you're changing them fundamentally. I would also say that's okay, so long as you're willing to deal with the ramifications of that. Right. So, for instance, we were talking yesterday about the idea of having one of the Fantastic Four be black. Or previously, like earlier, a couple years ago, having a black person play Spider-Man.
Right.
And for someone to say it makes no difference, well, no, it makes a difference because this is America and race matters. But the question for me is...
Humanity and race matters. I mean...
You're right. You're right. No. Fair. 100% fair. 100% fair. I didn't mean that as a critique of America. It's just this. Right. This is where I keep all my stuff.
But everyone can agree that Spider-Man should never be, I don't know, Portuguese.
That would be awful.
I don't even know what that means. I don't even know.
I know.
Please continue. Please continue. Go ahead.
I'm perfectly fine with having a black guy play Spider-Man, but that the people who made it would have to know that they are adding a dimension to the character, or I shouldn't say adding, changing a dimension of the character.
Right.
And that they are going to have to, at least in the world we live in for now, justify that. Yeah, and you're seeing like so. For instance, they made I guess on some version of the Green Lantern, they made the Green Lantern gay all of a sudden.
Right.
Or let me who cares about the Green Lantern? Nobody cares. I don't even care. People who care about the Green Lantern don't even care about the Green Lantern. Let's talk about something everybody cares about: Harry Potter. After Harry Potter came out and it was completely finished, all of the books were finished. Some press conference happens and J.K. Rowling goes, "Well, Dumbledore was gay." And it's sort of like, fine. Because to me, I was like, yeah, but either he, like, you can't say that because it's not clear that he was. Like, to me, I don't care that you're the author. If he was gay, there would have been a point in the book where it was clear that he was gay. So, like, you may have written him in your mind as a gay person, but that didn't actually influence the way I read it. And so now I have to go back and reimagine the character. Or, not that I imagine him as straight either, but by saying he's gay, you are now adding a dimension to the character, or you are shedding light on a dimension that you had in mind when you were writing it, but none of us knew about it as readers.
Right.
So,
yeah, there's no point. There's no point when you're reading the 7 books that you think in any way, shape, or form about Dumbledore's activities in the boudoir.
Now you can go back and read it, and there are things about the relationship he had with this other wizard,
Grindelwald,
and it's all consistent. It's consistent.
Yes.
It would work.
Yes.
But it doesn't actually, and so there's things like that where I'm like, all right, you know. So again, so if you're gonna like, well, let's just make him, Human Torch, let's just make him black. Well, wait a minute, and that's not what I'm saying they're gonna do in that movie. And so, or let's make this male character female. Let's just go ahead and make it female.
Right.
But when you do it, you got to know that you're going to be adding or changing a dimension of the character, and just do it conscientiously.
Here's what you can't do. Here's what you cannot do. You cannot make Spider-Man black and write him exactly the same in every way, except he gets shaded in with a different color pencil.
Ah, yes.
That's you can't like that. That is.
Well, you could, but you'd just be dumb.
Yeah, right. That's irresponsible, and I don't even mean irresponsible in terms of like race relations. I mean irresponsible in terms of telling an honest story. Yeah, just as an artist, as a storyteller, you're not being honest when you do that.
Right.
Yeah. So
I think gender in that sense is the same. I think the only way it's more difficult is just like, I just think the difference between race and the difference between gender is, I think there's much larger differences between genders than there are with races.
Sure.
By and large, generally. Sure. I think I have way more in common with a black man than I do with a white woman.
Answer me this.
Riddle me that.
Answer this question briefly through the lens of Linda Hunt as Billy Kwan in The Year of Living Dangerously.
Wow.
See what I did there? See what I did?
Yeah, everybody should know that in a movie we talked about, The Year of Living Dangerously, Linda Hunt is a female who played a male just as a male, and won an Academy Award for it.
Yep.
For Best Supporting Actress, of course.
Sure. Well, I mean, she is an actress.
I think when I read some stuff about the film, the guy who directed it, was it Peter Weir?
Yes.
Oh gosh, if it wasn't, I'm going to feel bad because I love that guy so much. And I don't want to attribute things to him falsely. But the director chose Linda Hunt because he was trying to find. Yes. Thank God, I love Peter Weir. That Peter Weir chose Linda Hunt because he wanted a man who just felt sort of different than normal men. Mm-hmm. That was sort of otherworldly and different. Yep. And he achieved that by casting a woman as a man. And so in his casting, he was trying to create he had in mind, I'm trying to do something that can't be I'm not finding the man that can play a man the way I want this man played.
So much exactly what we're talking
and Linda
about.
Linda Hunt is not stereotypically feminine.
Right, but that's so much what we're talking about, right? Like everything you just said speaks to him considering, right? And thinking about it and doing it purposefully. Right. And so even I think it totally and completely works. Not that it matters to me, but the Academy apparently agrees. But even if it didn't work, I don't care. That doesn't necessarily make it a bad call or like a.
It's what we call those noble failures.
Exactly.
Those are great. I love noble failures. Also, when you said it doesn't really matter to you if the Academy agrees, it kind of does. I get so much joy when they're like, okay, good. They're smart enough.
Here's what I mean when I say it doesn't matter to me. I get so much joy, but I also get joy out of hating them when they disagree. So they could have gone either way.
Woody Allen says it the best. He says if you agree with them when they love you, you have to agree with them when they hate you.
But I don't. Because I'm not.
Sure. but that's the most consistent. Like he is right. Like he is in the right in this case, and I won't say that very often, but he is right on about that. Like if you agree with what they say, when if you agree with your critics about the way they think you are great, then you'll agree with them. Then you have no choice but to agree with them when they think you're crappy. So if I get up and I preach and I say something and everyone's like, "Oh, I needed to hear that," and then I get up and I'm like, "That's right, I'm great at what I do," and then the next Sunday I get up and say something and people get angry with me, then I have to go like, if I loved that I was loved, then I have to go like, "Oh, I shouldn't have said that." Sometimes you got to piss people off. You know?
Sure. I guess I don't really care about being consistent in that way.
I know.
I'm going to cherry pick. You know what I mean?
You are. Yeah, that's right. You are. I'm trying to find the right word, but capricious, maybe.
Ooh, nice. Well done.
Remarkably unfettered by principle, I think is what I want to say.
Yes, I am nothing.
No, I don't actually agree with that. I think that you have a principle. I think it's just a different set of principles. I think your principle is I want to be entertained.
That's absolutely true.
So
and this gets back to our answer to the first question, right?
It really it's all like entertain me, call it a day.
Right. Yes, that's true.
So
that's so that'll do it, right?
Yeah, I just want to say it just made me realize. I think that means you don't hate snuff films because they're unethical. You hate them because they're not very good.
I can't imagine being entertained by one.
Right.
You know.
Right.
That's
right.
not. Hold on.
Dude. No, it was no. I don't think that about you at all.
I know. No. I know.
Literally is the funniest thing I can think of at the time.
But my answer to that is my response to Pain and Gain. I was actually offended by that on a moral level.
I know. I know you are a moral man. Yes, I agree completely. That is hilarious. Also, anytime
film with high production values, I will reconsider.
Bill Hicks did a whole bit about we should take people we should take people from death row, and we should take people who are dying in old folks' homes, just wasting away, and put them in action movies and use them instead of stunts.
Wow.
It's amazing. It's hilarious. And he's like, you want grandma to just be wasting away in some old folks home with like her last heartbeat struggling through her breast, and you can see it move its way down her arm through her translucent skin, or do you want her to meet Chuck Norris?
All right.
Put him in the movies. He does. I mean, if you and then like there's some people that aren't laughing. Bill Hicks, by the way, is a brilliant stand-up comedian who. Just brilliant. And anyway, and he doesn't like Christians very much, but I won't take it personally. But he does this. He does that whole thing, and then when some people aren't laughing, he goes, "Fine. You're not on board with me on this. That's fine. But one thing, do me one favor. Never say you love movies as much as I do."
Nice.
And with that, I think we have our mailbag for the week.
Indeed, that will bring us to the end of another week of Second Breakfast Podcast. It's been a lot of fun. We hope you've had fun too. Like us on
Josh.
Yes, thank you, Josh and Grant, for the questions. Comment on our video. Comment on Facebook. Find us on iTunes. Friend us on Facebook. Whole thing, whole shebang. Tell your friends.
With us.
So many things to do. You have so many jobs. But for now and for the weekend, for Second Breakfast Podcast, I'm Andy Roth, and that is Phil Duvall. Have a great weekend, everybody.
Ciao.
The most important meal of the day, second breakfast.